Hey, pilot, welcome back to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka. I hope you're having an awesome day today. We have a new guest, AJ Edwards. He is a Navy commander, super cool guy, and we are talking about what it's like to crash an aircraft and what the process is like afterwards. It's not very fun. I can tell you that. It is not very fun. But he reached out to me and offered to talk about this event that happened to him and what it was like. And I just think that it's important because if you never know when something's going to happen, where you're going to have a mishap. And if you crash a plane or you roll over a helicopter or whatever happens, the best case scenario is that everybody survives, right? But when it's done, there is an investigation. And if you're military, you go one way. If you're a civilian, NTSB handles all that. But it's very stressful. There's a lot that goes on. And AJ was very kind to come on and willing to share it. And we talked for about an hour about the whole process. If you know somebody that is going through that process, share this with them. I think it will be helpful and fruitful. A lot of good information in here and a lot of tips on how to be successful throughout the process, right? It was really good. So thank you to AJ for coming on the show. I hope that y'all like it. It's going to be very interesting. Okay. So sit back, relax. Let's get ready for pushback. It all started as a spark. Maybe it was the sound of jets racing across the sky, or the feeling of your heart racing as you watch a crop duster flying low and slow. Even then, you knew you were meant to fly. For pilots, it's more than just a job. It's a calling. The early mornings, the long hours, the relentless training, you didn't do it for the money. You did it for that moment. That moment when the wheels lift off and the earth falls away beneath you. But flying is just the beginning. The journey to your dream job takes more than just skill in the sky. It takes strategy on the ground and a lifetime of learning.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. Learn how to go from good to great, from flight school to regional to major, and from hopeful to hired. Whether you're sharpening your skills, building your resume, or preparing for that big interview, this is where pilots come to level up. Let's get ready for pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
All right. AJ Edwards. What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's a great day. I just finished smoking a brisket, and so we're going to have some brisket and pulled pork here a little bit later. It's like one of my days to get fat at home.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
Sweet.
Man, hey, thanks for coming on the show today. Why don't you tell the pilot that's listening a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so Naval Academy graduate, 2006, selected pilot out of there, went to primary flight school in Corpus Christi, stayed there probably longer than I should have. Unfortunately, didn't do the debt or anything like that because I had just gotten married. I do not recommend getting married in primary flight school. Yeah. But yeah, so selected helicopters out of there. At the time, there was a big P3 draft, so I would just figure that I was going to be a P3 guy like my dad. And but somehow I had selected helicopters as my first choice. Got helicopters. Went to HT-28 in Millington. I think I was like the fourth class going through HT-28. So for any of the older folks out there listening, that was the new one at the time. And got my wings May of 2008. Selected lamps, so light airborne multi-purpose systems for those not in the know. Went to Mayport near Jacksonville, Florida, and started doing operational stuff.
Lamps is 60 Romeos, right?
So it was 60 Bravos.
Or 60 Bravos.
Yeah, 60 Bravos. I eventually made my way to 60 Romeos, but not before did 2 deployments with HSL 48, one to Fifth Fleet, so out in the desert area, and then went on loan to HSL 60 and did a deployment down in South America. It was the most fun flying I've ever done in my entire life, down in the Caribbean. Night airborne use of force stuff, hunting drug runners. That was super cool, super dynamic flying. Just had the time of my life. Tons of scenic beach locations for great pictures and whatnot. So super fun. Then went as an instructor to HT 28, and from there was there for 4 years. Picked up TAR, or FTS at the time, and then for the really older guys, TAR. It was TAR, FTS, and TAR. And then went back to HSM 60, which is when I transitioned to the Romeo, and did 3 years there. Went to the War College, then on to staff work at Millington, flying a desk. So
Millington.
Yeah.
That's right. Millington, for those of you that are not in the know, is kind of this vortex that sucks in military people to do staff work and do paperwork to help all the personnel stuff that goes on. Like, hey, you're going here. You now have orders to go there. Hey, you're going to retire. Hey, you're going to do this and that.
Yeah.
And, it's an okay job. So, you were in HTs,
yeah.
And you had a pretty significant experience. What happened?
Yeah, so a little bit of the backstory, and it was, I think I was in my 3rd year of instructing. I was a pretty senior instructor. I had all the stand quals. I was the standardization guy, so doing all the check rides for other instructors and stuff like that. And it was, I'm just having the best time ever. And I was at that sweet spot that those safety guys always tell you about, where I think I was somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 hours at the time. And, like I said, the safety guys will tell you that is the spot where the most mishaps tend to happen. So you're kind of a little overly cocky, maybe a little complacent. You've been doing this forever. So statistically, like, this is the time, if it's going to happen, it happens. So that was the case with me. I was on my 9th set of on-wings. So for those who are not familiar with the on-wing system of the Navy flight school, once you get to advanced flight school as a student, and you and another guy or gal will get assigned an instructor, and that instructor takes you through basically the first 10 flights-ish and gets you up until your check ride and your solo. So this was my 9th set, so 18 students at the time. May have been my 8th set, doesn't matter, but so I'm just banging through students, and this particular day was February 12th of 2015. I was on my 3rd flight of the day, and so it's kind of mid to late afternoon, tired. I've seen all the exact same stuff from all the students. Every single mistake you can predict exactly what's going to happen every single time. And I got a little, crafty with my on-wing, and we had landed, and I had given him a taxi cut gun. So for those who don't know, right, for the non-helo guys, taxi cut gun, you basically roll the engine to idle, and you're just supposed to settle into the ground and in the grass.
And the point of that is to make sure that the student is ready in case they're hover taxiing, like the engine fails, you're low to the ground, you're kind of in this ground effect, and you've got some rotor speed, but you don't have any power. So you just let those turns bleed off smoothly and slowly as you settle onto the ground. And it should just be Should be a
Exactly.
non-event.
Exactly. So I'd done thousands of these things before with both students and instructors. There wasn't, in my mind at the time, there wasn't a thing that I hadn't seen. And so roll the twist grip on the student. It was kind of ugly. You know, it's a skid aircraft, the Bell 206. So you have to have pretty good alignment, especially to land on grass and dirt and whatnot. So it was pretty ugly. It was, you know, somewhat of a rocky landing and whatnot. So next time we picked up, I said, hey, we're going to do that one again, because he's about to go to his check ride. And at this point, like, we're a little bit long in the event. And I think we only had like an extra 0.2 or 0.3 hours that we could go over per the syllabus. And I was going to use every single second of that to make sure that my student was good to go for the check ride. So pick up and hover. This time it's not a surprise. I give him the countdown, 3, 2, and then immediately at 2, I just rolled the twist grip. So kind of a surprise. Yeah.
Dirty bastard.
He should have known. I've done it, 15 times before that. But rolled the twist grip on him. It was looking ugly again, but not unsalvageable. We settled into the ground. Helicopter hits the ground, bounces. Okay, which is not uncommon, not good, but not uncommon. It bounces and it turns to the right. Left spinning rotor. You got a little bit of that.
Yep.
So bounces, turns to the right about 10 degrees, maybe fewer. We bounce again. We hit, we bounce again. Turns more. Still at this point, I'm thinking everything is just fine, right? On the third bounce, we hit, or I should say the third landing, we hit, and the helicopter starts rocking up and to the right. And I knew within 1 second, that I was rolling over and that it was going to be unrecoverable. Or at least in my mind, I'm thinking it's going to be unrecoverable. And we can get into why that was a wrong assumption later. But so we rolled over to the right. The things that I remember today were the rotor blades smashing into the ground as I'm looking down and to the right, basically over my student's lap and through the windscreen. The rotor blades smashing into the ground, rotor blades smashing into my window as they're bending and breaking. And we settled on our right side. And, at that moment, it was completely surreal. I couldn't believe it at all what was happening. And I heard a crash over the radio. I heard my engine spool, and then I just killed the twist grip. So turning off the engine, cutting off the fuel flow, and I crawled out, helped my student crawl out my door, and that was it. So crashed a helicopter. Last thing in the world that you want to do as a pilot is to crash an airplane. Second to last thing that you want to do.
Was this like summertime and a hot day in Pensacola, or was it like winter?
Yeah, it was.
Fall?
It was technically winter, but in Milton, Florida, there are like 2 seasons, so it was still pretty warm. It was February, so still pretty warm, and weather was interesting that day. It was perfectly sunny, but extremely windy.
Yeah. And if you're not a helicopter pilot, one of the reasons this goes bad is a thing called dynamic rollover. Like there's a complete, like if I'm wrong, dude, just tell me. But in my mind, right, you're putting down, you bounce, it starts to turn and bounce, and then it turns more. As it turns, it probably caught the front end of that right skid and just brought it over. But once you get past a certain amount of degrees, like the physics of it doesn't let you recover from it. So like it's just, and it's not much. It's like I don't know, probably like 13 or 15 degrees or something not
Right.
not that huge, but once it goes, man, it's like nothing you can do. Is that a
Yeah,
decent
actually pretty
explanation?
good. That what's kind of interesting about this situation, a lot of stuff came out of the safety investigation. So there were two investigations that happened after the entire thing. The safety investigation, which is, how was this preventable from a kind of systemic standpoint, whether maintenance, whether whatever, right? So they go in to rule out maintenance, they go in to rule out, a failure of the helicopter components or whatever. And then there's another investigation, which was, kind of all eyes on me, spotlight, whatnot. But one of the things that they found in the safety investigation was that the skid shoes on the skids had been separated from the skid pretty significantly. Let me back up because I should probably explain what a skid shoe is. So the skids on a helicopter are just tubes and, metal tubes. And so knowing that these helicopters are going to land on all kinds of terrain, pavement, dirt, grass, all this kind of stuff, rocks, they put a, sheet metal, a thin piece of sheet metal around the bottom of those tubes, hold it on with not zip ties, but, like the metal version of zip ties. And before the mishap, there was no limit on how much that metal could be separated from the tube. And so what they found was that as we hit that third time and we're moving to the right on the ground, if that skid shoe had either been, conformed to the skid, then it wouldn't have shoveled into the dirt like it did. We were kind of moving this, a little bit to the right. And had there been no skid shoe or had the skid shoe conformed, then we could have recovered and just had a hard landing. But in this case, on that third bounce, there was that skid shoe that shoveled in. So it created that fixed point of rotation. And if anybody's ever been into a physics class where you sit on this swivel chair and then the teacher spins the bicycle tire and next thing you know, you're like twisting. It's the same type of thing. You get into that dynamic rollover situation very quickly.
That is, first off, that's better news than just completely your fault, right? Like it's not good news, but it's better news, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what's going through my head.
Yeah, it was cool to hear that, hey, there was actually something that the safety investigation found, that because there were no limits, nobody had ever really batted an eye at the fact that the skid shoes are separating, that was a contributing factor in this mishap. Afterwards, they put in limits for the maintenance team. It was contract maintenance. And so it couldn't be separated from the skid tube any more than like a quarter inch or less. So that was cool, right? After all of this, we improved some maintenance practices. Not that they had been doing anything wrong in the first place. It just, that wasn't on anybody's radar.
For those of you that are not in the military or have never been in the military, once you crash an aircraft and you do a certain amount of damage to that aircraft, there's a process that the mishap investigation starts, and they go through all of these different causal factors, like you mentioned. And I remember when this happened because I was at safety school when this happened, and we had started talking about like, oh man, wonder what's going on. But so they identify, like, it's a long process where this investigation just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it can take significant amounts of time. But once it kind of comes, once they look at the aircraft and they figure out those factors, they're also looking at the pilots and the pilot's responsibility. And what was, like, did the pilots participate? Are they part of the causal factors, like the things? Maybe they're fatigued. Maybe they made the wrong input. Maybe they did something nefarious. Maybe they didn't. And that is a big process. And that's and everybody who's in a class alpha mishap goes through this process. And so
Yeah.
I want to kind of get into that because then they do what's called a FNAEB investigation, right? So talk me
Okay.
through
Yeah.
what that was like.
After I crawled out of the helicopter, I knew immediately. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So
Were you okay?
I
Okay.
like to caveat the not a scratch on me with there was legitimately a scratch on me. And the student was totally fine. So that was great. As far as outcomes go in a class Bravo or Alpha, that's great. Crawled out of the helicopter. I immediately knew that my aviation career was over. I was wrong, but in my head, I knew it. That was one of those things that, can't talk myself out of that. I'm done. So we crawl out. My student, I walked away. I dropped on my knees, like head and hands, the whole nine, until the crash crew came out. And my student immediately, after he kind of like checked himself, came over to me. Sir, are you okay? I said, man, I'm good. And he said, let's talk about it. And I said, let's not. Because it was kind of a gut instinct, having, gone through flight school and all this kind of stuff. Like, you don't ever want the perception that you are trying to check your stories, you know what I mean, between parties type thing. Like, let's get our story straight. Yeah. So I said, hey man, let's just not talk. And we'll go through this thing, because I didn't say this, but in the back of my mind, I know that we're going to get interviewed today, tomorrow, for a long time. And I don't want our stories to be perfect. You know what I mean? So I knew that in the back of my head.
Yeah.
So we didn't talk. Crash crew came, got in the ambulance, took off, went to the hospital because that's just procedure. And, had to give a bunch of fluids and make sure I wasn't drunk or any of that kind of stuff. So this is without the process having started, the FNAEB, and I'll mention what the FNAEB stands for, but that is the start of the process. The start of the safety process, the start of the FNAEB process is you go to the hospital, you get checked out, you provide a bunch of fluids, and then after that, we generate the paperwork, if you will. So, and I was lucky. I had a great friend of mine who was a flight doc, and he was there and at the hospital, came back with me that night to the squadron. And so all good. So FNAEB is FNAEB, Field Naval Aviator Evaluation Board. And for those who have seen Top Gun, which I demand everybody in the audience sees Top Gun, was after Goose dies, right? Maverick is standing in front of basically what looks like a jury, or a bunch of judges. And they said, hey, go back flying. He turns around all sad. And then he gets back in the aircraft and at Top Gun. That was the completion of his FNAEB.
And FNAEB is the dirtiest word in naval aviation.
Oh my gosh. It is the dirtiest word. You do not want to have a FNAEB. So as a officer, naval aviator, the two things that you definitely don't want are captain's mast and a FNAEB. I've been to both, but the captain's mast is a totally different story.
Admiral's mast for officers, right?
Yeah. They have to get to a bunch of officers together, more senior officers together to be the panel of this board. And they're kind of just doing a lot of the same stuff that the safety team is doing, which is looking into all the factors, taking witness statements, taking the pilot's statements, all that kind of stuff. And I knew going into it, as I'm getting briefed by my skipper and my XO, that, part of the stipulation is you have every right to be there for all of the proceedings, none of the proceedings, whatever you want to do. You don't just have to show up for your interview. If you want to be there, you can. So I knew that the board was going to meet. I think it was like day 8 or 9 after the whole incident, and I said, "Hey, Skipper, I'm just going to be there the whole time. I've got nowhere else to be. I'm not on the flight schedule. I'm just going to show up, and whatever they want, they can pepper me with questions, or they can, basically, I just want to know what the process is, what they're doing." So I did that, and they basically interviewed me first, and told them my entire side of the story. I was not there for my students' version of the story because they were not. My student was not in any kind of. The microscope was not on him, obviously, because
Right.
I'm the instructor. I'm the guy who signed for the aircraft. I'm the guy who's responsible for the safe conduct of the flight. So the microscope is on me. By the end of my interview, that was great. And now it's, they start getting a bunch of, witness statements, character statements, trying to figure out what the procedures are. They're, diving into all the publications and stuff like that to make sure that I did the right stuff. That I, like you said before, like I haven't been a cavalier or, like maverick, instructor or something like that. I'm just like, am I a procedural compliance guy? And then the character statements are a lot the same way, which is.
And I do want to mention that in the Navy specifically, the procedures that we have for the different things that we do are typically written to give you enough rope to hang yourself with. There's a lot of a lot of them are wide open. There's some ambiguity there, and there's opportunity for you to use common sense and good judgment to accomplish whatever task that is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's from what I have heard. Don't quote me, but different than the Air Force view. Again, don't quote me. Not casting aspersions, throwing shade at the Air Force, but we have a lot of don't do versus this is what you can do. So to your point, yeah, we have a lot of rope where we can hang ourselves. And I've towed that line on a couple of occasions, and had skippers go, "Don't ever do that again," and I go, oh, "Yeah, cool, Wilco." So a lot of fun there. I think that as I'm sitting there and listening to all these guys, I'm basically clean as far as procedural compliance goes. Nobody had anything bad to say about me as an instructor, my techniques, my style, any of that kind of stuff. I'm pretty gregarious guy, pretty fun loving and whatnot, especially in the aircraft. Try to keep things light. Definitely not any kind of yeller or anything like that in the aircraft. So, what was really great is that in this state of mind where I'm, I think I'm done. All of the other instructors, even guys senior to me, like lieutenant commanders and majors, are coming in and basically saying, "Hey, AJ is almost the most senior guy here as far as experience. Like, if we ever have a question, we go to AJ, because he's the standardization instructor." So it really boosted my ego when it had been very recently shattered, and that was great. By the end of the thing, the board had, they had a very good impression of me, and practically thought that I walked on water. I didn't, but the thing that they found out of all of the stuff was I had not guarded the collective, which is the power, right? That's what changes the pitch on the rotor blades and makes you go up and down. And I had not done a good enough job of blocking the student from popping up on that collective right after we hit. So he had popped up. That gave us that extra lift that really, started the momentum over. And what the safety investigation had found after they recreated the situation in the simulator over and over and over is that had I guarded that collective, or even within a split second dropped the collective, had I caught it and then dropped it, would have recovered the aircraft. So, that was one of those things where they said, hey, would you instruct this any differently going forward? And I said, with the exception of that collective thing, like I wouldn't do anything differently. Which the board, which was led by a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, he had just gotten done being the skipper of VTs. He was on his way to go do bigger and better things. He loved that answer. He said, hey, you're confident in your style. This is one of those things where, kind of cost of doing business type thing, right? You can't be perfect at every single moment with every single thing. And he recommended after this that I just get back in the aircraft.
I want to dive down on that, because honestly, having that lieutenant colonel as the head of the board is probably the most fortuitous thing in this whole journey.
Yeah.
Because I have never been through a FNAEB process. However, I have many friends and know a lot of people that have been through the process. And man, whoever the head of the board is, like, that's the tone of the entire thing. Yeah. So if you've got a person that, I mean, that you are not click with, but that you are, that sees you where you are and knows where you are and has the understanding of what it takes to get there and do that. And other than like guarding the collective, which is one little thing, that's one little half a second of mistake. That is so fortuitous, bro.
No, it was really great, because it wasn't as though like I've just got my hand, floating up in the air. It was like I didn't catch that quarter of an inch, like little whatever. And that's what, kind of did the whole thing. So I totally agree, especially when you have, a lot of these Marine instructors are pretty, they can be pretty hard nosed. It's like work hard, play hard with a lot of these guys, which I completely love and appreciate. Like I always say, like I tried to be a Marine out of the academy, but I was disqualified because my parents were still married. But sorry.
But oh, I love it. I'm going to tell Vapor Walsh that he's going to give you a call.
But me and this guy like really clicked, and he was just like, bro, you're good to go, man. Like, that's cost of doing business. This is the type of stuff that could happen to anybody, which is great to hear, but you almost like don't believe it no matter who says it. Like it just doesn't happen to me. You know what I mean? Like, I've got this.
Also, it's also not up to the head of the board either. So I want to say that. So you're still worried.
At this point, I'm not. I'm thinking it's all good. The report goes up to my skipper and my XO. My skipper was a Navy commander. My XO was a different Marine lieutenant colonel. Both just awesome guys. Just truly appreciate everything that they did throughout the process and supporting me, and not like I would go into my skipper's office and I'm like, I let you down. I had some very close moments in his office where he was consoling me and basically saying, "You've not let me down. I've not lost my confidence in you." So like that was really awesome to have that kind of support. So after the board report goes up to them, they said, "Hey, we're sending it up to the Commodore, who's a Marine Corps colonel, full colonel." And, after P read the report after, a couple days, he was like, "This looks great. We'll send it up to Sinatra," which is the chief of Naval Air Training. And this should be put to bed. Everything's, good to go. Safety investigation is kind of still happening in the background, but no malicious intent, no, negligence, no, whatever. Get them back in the aircraft. If you haven't heard anything from me, this is the Commodore. basically told my front office, skipper and XO, if you haven't heard anything from me, by this day, put him back in the aircraft. So the process has now been going on for 5 or 6 weeks, and that day comes.
That's pretty quick.
It was very quick. Meanwhile, I'm like just standing watch nonstop, like I'm the CDO. So like just logging flight hours for everybody else but me, routing the schedule up to the front office, like.
But you're probably doing the best job of anybody that's ever done it too, because you're like, it's your only thing. And it's the only thing keeping you from going crazy.
Yeah. It was pretty wild. I took a little bit of leave in there after everything had wrapped up, to go down to Texas to visit some family. And something happened while I was on leave. A friend from out in the fleet had called me up about an article that I had written and got published. But I'll get back to that because it was funny and demoralizing at the same time. But so that day from the Commodore, that, he said this was the drop dead date. If you haven't heard anything, just assume Sinatra's approved it, get him back in the aircraft. So that day came and went. My front office came and said, hey, AJ, you're going to do a back in the saddle flight tomorrow, and then you're going to instruct. And I said, great, let's go. So that next day I did a back in the saddle flight. Everything felt fine. I was a little nervous about the whole thing. Everything felt fine. I got the willies a couple times when doing those cut guns and in full auto rotations. Sure. But for the most part, I got out of the aircraft. Skipper and XO said, how do you feel? I said, I feel great. And they said, great. You're doing an ATOPS check for Lieutenant Commander so-and-so tomorrow. And I said, okay.
An ATOPS check is like your annual check ride to make sure that you're still a good pilot. And so you are the evaluator. Another instructor is a student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Great.
It was pretty great. So I'm like feeling on top of the world, right? I still have that FNAEB, like in my NATOPS jacket, in the back of my logbook, everywhere. And I'm, so like that alone is kind of demoralizing and not a great feeling. But hey, my Navy career, my aviation career isn't over. So I was kind of riding high on that, and got back in, started giving this NATOPS check. And weather rolls in as it just always does in Florida. So we had to knock it off a little more than halfway through the flight, came back. And as soon as I get back up to the squadron, my XO comes up to me and says, hey, did you already fly today? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, Commodore called me and I think we got some wires crossed. I don't think you're supposed to be flying. I said, okay. He said, the Commodore said that we're still waiting on Sinatra. He's not, hasn't reviewed it, hasn't approved it. So let's keep you off the schedule for a couple days. I said, okay, that's fine. I'm still thinking everything is all right. Literally that was a Thursday, 6 weeks to the day after my mishap. The very next day, that night, I got a call from the CDO, the command duty officer, the thing that I had been doing for, weeks and weeks. I got a call from him saying that somebody else had rolled over an aircraft at the bottom of a auto rotation from our squadron. And I'm kind of shocked at the moment, but then about 2 seconds later, I went, oh no, Sinatra is not going to love the fact that the squadron has, put 2 in the dirt within 2 months. Yep. Like that's not cool. It is a
big deal.
It is a very big deal. So that's when it started setting in. That couple days of waiting is going to be more than a couple days. I was just waiting after that. And like I said, I'd gone down to Texas. a friend of mine had called and said, "You're a clown, dude." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "This approach article." I said, "What approach article?" So rewind about 9 months prior, the safety officer of the squadron says, I need to up our stats for safety article submissions to Approach Magazine. I said, "Jim, what do you want from me?" And he goes, "I need an article." And I said, "I don't have anything, dude. Like, I'm not going to do it." He said, just do it. And I said, "Well, if you're forcing me to do it, it's going to be over the top. It's going to be silly. And so you can just submit it. They'll never publish it." And he goes, "Yeah, I don't care, dude. Just do it." So I did. Yeah.
Oh,
And it was, like a not uncommon event in training, especially when you're doing full auto rotations in the HTs, is every once in a while you get a little too nose up and you strike the tail hook, or it's not tail hook, but yeah, a little dinger. And it's there in the event that you get a little too nose high in an auto rotation close to the ground. So like that was a non-event basically.
I do want to say real quick that the Approach Magazine is like the preeminent aviation safety magazine for the Navy. And every pilot reads it, and every pilot, like they put stacks of them in every single squadron. And so the safety officers across the military or across the Navy, they submit articles to help. The whole idea is to help pilots be better, be more safe, think about things that maybe they're not thinking about. And so that's the point of that magazine. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think it was online at the time, but maybe he had taken a picture of it and sent it to me. And I went, "Oh man, I wrote that a long time ago." Skipper and XO thought it was hilarious, but I don't think anybody ever thought it was going to get published. Well, they must have had a dearth of submissions that month at the safety center, decided to publish the thing. So it gets published, and I had already been told that I was going to go be interviewed to complete my FNAEB. I was going to be interviewed by the Admiral, by Sinatra himself. So, after the comedy had worn off, about 10 seconds later, I went, "Oh no, the Admiral is definitely going to read this article. Hopefully he doesn't remember the name." But like you said, every aviator is going to see this in the head somewhere. They're sitting in a waiting room at the dentist's office or whatever, and they're just flipping through this thing. And my article was, the peak of silliness. About a real event. And I immediately knew, like, this Admiral is going to think that I don't take my job seriously. So flew down to Corpus Christi where Sinatra is, just an overnight trip, flew down there, basically rehashed the entire FNAEB thing. It was almost an identical interview with him and his chief of staff. And the Admiral, I think, was a 1 or 2 star. Can't remember. I won't say his name. Super great guy. But we go through rehash the entire thing. And I'm feeling confident. I've been back in the aircraft. 6 weeks ago, I was back in the aircraft as an instructor. And at the very end of the interview, he said, "So you wrote this article," and my heart sank at that moment. So I said, "Yes, sir, I did." He goes, "Can you tell me what it's about?" And I'm like blanking at this point. I was like, "I cannot remember. It does not compute." Kind of froze. Then he enlightens me. He said, "It was about a tail strike." I said, "Yeah, it was." And that's, he had a few questions after that, but I kind of knew at the end of that this was not going to be exactly what I hoped for. And he didn't have to think about it too much longer after that whole process. By the way, there are basically 4 outcomes from a FNAEB. One is, keep your wings, stay in the community, keep flying, all good. The other is keep your wings, keep flying, get put on probation or some sort of remedial something. The other two, it's keep your wings, don't ever fly again, or you don't get to have your wings. Have a nice day. Going into this whole thing, going into the sit down with the Admiral, the recommendation was, basically the best recommendation. That is what I was flying under the assumption of, which was, keep your wings, keep all your quals, go ahead. So at the end of this thing, he says, it's like 1B or something like that. And I went, wait, that doesn't match up with the recommendation that the FNAEB board gave to the Admiral. And he said, you're going to be on a 6-month remedial, 6 months probation with a remedial syllabus to continue to instruct. And so that was kind of a setback, a letdown, if you will. And I was kind of butthurt about the entire thing. And I was like, man, that stupid article, but also did I come off as cocky even before all that? And, it had worked with, the lieutenant colonel during the board. I had a brief moment before the entire thing started, before even sitting down with the FNAEB of how much do I tell, how honest do I actually, should I actually be? And I just, that thought came and went very quickly. I just said, just lay it all out there. What do you have to lose other than your integrity? And so I just did. And that, my demeanor, my, confidence, if you will, worked. I went in with basically the exact same mentality with the Admiral, and the outcome was not quite what I was looking for. And then I started second guessing myself, and I shouldn't have been so confident. I should have, why was I so honest? All that kind of stuff. So, I got back, told my skipper XO, and they said, hey, AJ, don't worry about it. We're going to get you in this remedial syllabus. You'll be in and out of that quickly. Sorry, have to take all your quals away. You're not an ATOPS instructor anymore. You're not a standardization instructor. My job in the squadron, my ground job was, the standardization instructor. So lost my ground job, as an outcome of that. And, I got through the remedial syllabus very easily. Nobody was, putting me under an excessive microscope or anything like that. It was just this thing. Immediately started flying with students again, going through on wings again, doing that whole process. I was applying for the TAR board, the FTS board at the time, got rejected from the first one of those. I had already told my detailer that it was, FTS or bust. So I was going to resign. I didn't get picked up. I'm about to get booted from the Navy. I'm on this remedial syllabus. I'm going to, career conferences in DC, and, my whole world was kind of just in this thing, but at least I'm flying. So it was a very turbulent, emotional, crazy time in my life. But, everything worked out, in the end.
Tell me how you bounced back from that. Because you stayed in. You're still in.
My entire focus was on my family and making sure that I could be a provider for my wife and children. Had 3 at the time, have 4 now. So I just had in the back of my mind, whatever happens, I have to maintain my integrity. And if I don't bounce back, right, I will, if I don't already seem like a failure to my wife, then I will most certainly seem like a failure if I don't, right? And my wife would never
Yeah.
even during the time, like she never said like, you're a failure. Like none of that. She was just, the most supportive confidant I could possibly have. But she believed in me. And so knowing that, I just knew that like everything was going to be fine. However it worked out, everything was going to be fine. And, like a lot of it was just running around with like a chicken with my head cut off, because I just don't know the outcome. And that's a tough place to be in. I'm writing resumes for the first time. I'm going in front of strange people at conferences. It was bizarre, but I just kept going, kept flying to the extent that I could. And I also requested to take a break from on wings for a while, and just changed it up. Like I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I started doing the instrument syllabus for a little while. Then I said, maybe I want to do NVGs. So, got qualified to instruct in NVGs and started doing that. And then, just pounding away at resumes and stuff like that. And all the while in the back of my mind, just going, like, don't have to, sell my house, right? Get a job, do whatever it takes, flying or not. And I was primarily focused on, not flying jobs, because I thought that the FNAEB was kind of like a killer. So I don't know if that quite answers your question of how I bounced back, but knowing that my teammate back at home was on my side was huge.
Well, I'll say this. I have encountered a lot of people in my life, even before the show, and all, being accessible to pilots and trying to help them get to where they want to go in professional aviation. I have had, like, my best friend had a FNAEB, and he was a Hornet pilot. And long story short, he was not allowed to fly anymore, but he kept his wings. And I'll tell you what, that guy's at an airline, and that guy, man, like he interviewed at every company. He, like, imagine a senior Hornet guy getting out with a FNAEB, and he was flying regionals when they were paying in the 20s, and then with a big family and all the things, and just trying to make it happen. And he would keep getting interviews and keep getting turned down, and keep getting interviews and keep getting turned down. And he probably did 10 interviews with airlines, and anyway, like, whether it's, and also like all the contracting companies and stuff like that. And he just wouldn't quit and succeeded. And that's, like, hats off to my guy. He knows who he is. So you've had a solid career in the Navy, and now at some point you're going to have a choice. And are you going to go and do spreadsheets, or are you going to go and try to be a professional aviator? Do you want to fly fixed wing or helicopters? Like, have you thought about it?
Yeah, I have. With my quals, I got the CFI for helicopters, got, type rating in the S70, all that kind of stuff, rotary ATP. So, like, have all of that kind of stuff that I got while I was an instructor. I have the helicopter aviation jobs that I've looked into, totally qualified. The fixed wing stuff, not as much. So building flight time right now in Cessnas at the Flying Club. I'm actually leaving for Sanders Aviation to do my multi-engine upgrade. Leaving on Sunday. Yeah. So doing that and doing some time building. So yes, my plan is to do commercial aviation, get into fixed wing stuff. As much as I love flying helicopters, I think there's probably a better lifestyle, way of life than what I'm looking for with helicopters. So, or by going into fixed wing versus helicopters.
Yeah, I think you're right, and everybody kind of finds where they want to be, and kind of goes down that path. And you're kind of in a great spot right now, because you'll need that time at Sanders, and then, but regionals and 135s are paying so much better now than if you were to, if you were to have done this in 2015. Your kids might qual for the Marine Corps. So, because it would be really tough on a family to try to fight through that. And so like, it's a good place to be. So like, have some solace in that for sure.
Yeah.
What advice, like as we're ending the show today, right? If somebody's in the military and they have a mishap and they're going to have to go through this process, doesn't matter what branch, because everybody follows a super similar process. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I would say that, kind of the old adage, honesty is the best policy, from what I found, despite the, somewhat negative outcome from the Admiral. I knew that not talking to my co-pilot turned out to be a really good decision. They liked that. The board did. And, if you have the right attitude and you go out there and you say, hey, like if you own the mistake, and you're fully open and honest, you're humble, you display that humility, but not getting too down on yourself, then, you can recover from just about anything. And, if I'm an example of that, it's only because I think that my attitude going into it was, I'm not trying to hide anything. So that's what I would say is, don't hide. You don't have to overshare, but don't hide behind anything. Don't get argumentative. Just, open kimono, let people know. So
that's good advice, man. Well, AJ, thanks for being part of the show, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, you bet, Nick.
All right, pilots, that's a wrap on this episode, and I know what you're thinking. You need to make yourself a little bit better. So how do you make yourself a little bit better? You tighten up your resume. So here's what I want you to do. Go over to my website, spitfireelite.com/podcast, and you can download my free resume template. It is tight, organized, and it's the perfect pilot resume. It's just something I like to do for the pilot group, and it is free to you. So go over there, spitfireelite.com/podcast, and download your free resume template. While you're over there, look at all the services that we offer. Lots of great interview prep, lots of great application review. Everything you need to be a professional pilot is right there. spitfireelite.com/podcast. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next episode.